Whatever you want. All right.
There's plenty of seats on the sides. Okay, so firstly, we'd like to ask everyone to please close your cell phones unless you're waiting for Nefesh to accept your application to make Aliyah. Okay, thank you. Welcome to Young Israel. We thank the Young Israel, Rabbi Moskowitz, for opening the doors, and special thanks for Dina and Jonathan Dagmi for sponsoring this beautiful evening with Rabbi Friedman. Thank you very, very much. So I assume most of you have been to Eretz Israel, and maybe you've met some Jews from Yemen, Teimanim. You might be aware that Jews from Yemen live extraordinarily long lives, much longer than any other demographic group in Israel. If we ask someone from Yemenite background how old or the parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, they'll tell you crazy numbers, 105, 110, 115. And Baruch Hashem, the last 10, 20, 30 years, they're not living as long because we have good intermarriage. Yemenite Jews have married Moroccan Jews, Polish Jews, etc., etc. So a man walks into a life insurance office in Tel Aviv, and he says, I want to buy a life insurance policy. Mr. Sharabi, Ben Kamata. Sharabi is like Mr. Smith in America. Mr. Sharabi, Ben Kamata, how old are you? 70. I'm sorry, Atazaken, we can't sell your policy, you're too old. He said, that's ridiculous. Why is that ridiculous? Because my father bought a policy last week. How's your father? 90. We can't sell you a policy, and we didn't sell your father a policy. Check the computer. They check the computer. Atzatodek, you're right. We have no choice. Come back next Monday, take a medical exam, and if you're in good shape, we'll sell your policy. I can't. Why not? Because my grandfather's getting remarried. How old's your grandfather? 110. Why is your grandfather getting remarried at 110? His parents are driving him crazy. Thank you. Thank you. Vintage Rabbi Bookwell, thank you. If we laughed, it's because we know that as Jews, as long as we're alive, we can change, we can grow. Right? We can hear a topic many, many times, but we hear it again and again, and we get new understandings. I just want to share with you how Rabbi Friedman changed my life. Many years ago, Lubavitch Rebbe told us, get ready, Mashiach is coming. Okay? And there was an uproar in the yeshiva world. How can the Rebbe say this? We don't deserve it. We don't have the zchut. We don't have the merit. And I heard Rabbi Friedman say the following thing. If you would ask people, okay, do we have more zchut? Do we have more merit 500 years ago? The answer is, yes. Mashiach didn't come 500 years ago. And the way things are looking, we know the numbers last year, 75, 78% of non-Orthodox intermarrying. It doesn't look like the Jewish world's heading in a good place. So Mashiach didn't come. Mashiach's not coming. So Rabbi Friedman said the following. Imagine a chassan and kala are under the chuppah, and the chassan says to the kala, I have to step away. An hour, a week, a month, 2 months, all the guests have left. Everyone's ridiculing the kala. You're crazy. Her gown is turning yellow. The moths are having kiddush. 2,000 years we have not seen our chassan under the chuppah. 2,000 years, and we're still under the chuppah. And I believe if we still have the emunah, we have the bitachon, to believe that that glorious day is still going to happen because we have Rabbi Friedmans in our generation to teach and inspire us. With that, Rabbi Friedman, thank you so much.
I don't know about you, but I'm not in the mood for any heavy conversations, and serious, philosophical, theological, and other big words. So let's not do that. Let's just share some stories. When the Rebbe sends you out on shlichus, and you go away to a place that is not familiar, different people, different mentality, it's bound to be funny. There's got to be a lot of entertaining stories. And of course, you learn something from every one of them. It was in the early 70s, and I was asked to speak at Berkeley, University at Berkeley. That was the hot spot. The feminists, the radicals. So I'm speaking to this group of college students, and I tell them what I do. I have a program in Minnesota for women where you study. I thought that would be nice, right? One of the women says, "So you teach there. What does your wife do?" So I said, "My wife runs a home for unwanted children." And she was impressed. But I said, "Actually, they're our children. Nobody else wants them. So my wife is raising them." And all of a sudden, she wasn't impressed. She said, "Oh, so your wife doesn't do anything?" I offered to put the kids out on the street. And if nobody picks them up in 24 hours, we'll take them in, and then my wife will be a hero for raising unwanted children. It was so clear, the lack of consistency. If you raise children who are hurt, then you're a hero. If you raise children not to be hurt, you're doing nothing. Crazy thinking, no? But when I first came to Minnesota, I was in my early 20s, newly married, and I was very excited about starting to teach and to speak and to... So I get a phone call. If you heard the story, I think you'll enjoy it a second time too. I get a phone call from a teenage girl in a high school, and she asks me if I would come speak to her class about intermarriage from a Jewish perspective. So I said, "Of course. That's what I'm here for. And this is going to be my first event." Very exciting. The day comes for the talk, and I'm thinking, and I'm straight out of Crown Heights, out of yeshiva, I'm thinking, what do you wear when you go to speak to high school kids that are not Jewish? This was not a Jewish high school. So I went and I borrowed a leather jacket. Nothing radical, a motorcycle jacket. I put it on and I go off to the class. This is a suburb of Minneapolis, rural Minneapolis. Some of the students come to school on horseback. You get the picture? This is really out there. There are 2,000 kids in the school, 4 Jewish students. Out of the 4 Jewish students, 2 of them are in this class, and it's a home economics class. I never figured out why they were discussing intermarriage. I don't know. This is 1971. I walk into the classroom, and I'm horrified, because sitting there is a priest and a minister who I thought had already given their view, and now they wanted a Jewish view. But I had misunderstood. They wanted a panel. So the 3 of us were going to speak as a panel, presenting each, their religions. So there's a rabbi, a priest, and a minister, and it's not a joke. Because the Chabad policy is that we don't sit in interfaith. So this is all wrong. I don't belong there, I shouldn't be there, I shouldn't have gone there. And that's it. It's my first event and I'm finished. Word will get back to New York, I'm fired, go home, that's it. So I'm panicking. I can't exactly walk out. To make matters worse, the teacher comes over and says, we only have 45 minutes, so you'll each speak for 5 minutes. That's a problem. I can't speak for 5 minutes. Because for that you have to prepare. And I didn't prepare. I'm going to come talk about intermarriage. Anyway, I don't know. I don't know what to think. This is a mess. I'm in trouble. The priest spoke, and in about 5 minutes, he said, it's against the church to intermarry. The church will not recognize the marriage. But if you do intermarry, you have to raise your children Catholic. That's the Catholic. Took him about 5 minutes. Then the minister spoke. They're both old enough to be my grandfather at that time. The minister spoke, and he said, you know, the divorce rate is very high. Domestic peace and domestic tranquility is not easy. Why would you want to make it even harder by marrying someone from a different faith? So it's not a good idea. It puts stress on the relationship, and he has pamphlets to hand out. Now, I got to speak. I can't delay it anymore. I get up in front of the class, and I cannot think of anything to say. I'm paralyzed. This is a mistake. I shouldn't be here. It's all over. I just finished unpacking. I got to start packing again. I'm going back to Brooklyn. It's finished. So I'm standing in the front of the class. I have to say something, but there's nothing going on. I can't think of anything to say. Besides which, if I say, you're not allowed to intermarry, it's not a marriage, it's not good, it's not acceptable, how is that different from what the priest said? If I say it's not a good idea, there's going to be conflict, well, the minister already said that. What can I say? Sure, it's okay, go ahead. I'm in enough trouble without that. So really, the brain is frozen and I have nothing to say. So here's what happens when you must talk, but your brain is paralyzed. Literally what happens is your mouth starts to talk. And your brain is interested in what it has to say. So you're listening to yourself talk and you don't know what you're saying. This literally happens. It's like talking in your sleep. So I said, why would we be discussing intermarriage in today's day and age? This is the 70s. Nobody gets married anymore. It's true, on the cover of Time magazine, after the crazy 60s, if you remember, marriage is done, nobody needs it anymore, it's passé, nobody's going to be marrying anymore. That was the cover story of Time magazine. I said, look, nobody gets married, so what's the difference if it's inter or not inter? There's no marriage. You live together as long as you like, you don't like, you leave. You should have seen the look on these kids' faces. I mean, it was strange enough to see a rabbi with a beard. They never saw that before. And with a leather jacket. Weird. Saying that we shouldn't get married anymore? They were, and the two Jewish kids are giggling into their sleeve. And the priest got very upset, and he objected, and he said, that's living in sin. You're not allowed to do that. That is forbidden. It's sinful. These kids, the teenagers, very politely, very respectfully, give me an argument about why you need to get married. They're trying to convince me that marriage is necessary. And I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I should be saying. I'm completely out of control. So one boy says, human beings are not designed to live alone. We need companionship. I said, sure. One companionship, two companionship, all the companionship you want. But why are you getting married? This girl says, I want somebody to support me when I grow up. I said, why are you going to school? Get good grades and support yourself. Now, obviously, I don't mean anything I'm saying. The mouth is just doing its own thing. Finally, one girl says, if you have a baby, the baby has to have a mother and a father. And I'm completely out of control on this, going downhill without brakes. I said, babies? Nobody has babies anymore. Have you heard of birth control? The priest got upset. And he says, that's unnatural, that's forbidden. 25 minutes later, the students all said, so why do we get married? I said, the only reason I know is because God told Adam and Chava to be monogamous, and since then, people get married. It's God's idea. And then I thought of something to say. I said, and that's why intermarriage doesn't make sense. The only reason to get married is because that's the way God wants you to live. So why would you marry someone He doesn't want you to marry? That's like making a Seder on Pesach night and serving bread. I mean, either make a Seder or don't. But don't make a Seder and serve bread. The bell rings, class is over. Saved by the bell. The funny thing is, the minister says, can I walk you out to the car? And I can't imagine what he wants. We're walking down this long corridor, and he's deep in thought. Finally, he says, very seriously, he says, what you were saying in the classroom, is that from the Old Testament? I said, it's the only one I've read. He says, we spend way too much time on the New Testament. And I discovered something. The world is interested in Judaism. The whole world. This is 1970, 71. And since then it has grown and increased. The world is eager to know what the Torah says. The most religious of other religions studying Torah. We are a light to the nations. So now I got to tell you another story. I got friendly with this minister. He would call me from time to time. If you want to know what a Jew is, amazing, amazing insight. He calls me one day and he says, Rabbi, I need your help. There's a young couple here in our community. He is of Jewish birth. But he's a member of our church. He's married to one of our local women. They've had their first baby. The mother wants to baptize the baby, and the father won't let. Now, I've tried to reason with him, but he won't hear me. Could you talk to him? You get the picture? A minister wants a rabbi to convince a Jew to baptize his child. I said, this is amazing. I wouldn't miss this opportunity. I said, give me his number. I call him up. I said, I understand there's a problem with baptizing your child. He says, there's no problem. He won't be baptized, and that's the end of it. I said, okay. See if I care. Don't baptize him. I just want to tell you, if you should ever change your mind and want to baptize the child, it wouldn't be a sin. The child is not Jewish, so go ahead, baptize him. He says, I'm Jewish, my child is Jewish, and he will not be baptized. I said, beautiful. I'm glad you feel that way. I'm just telling you, technically, should you ever, hypothetically, should you ever want to baptize the child, it would be okay. He says, no child of mine is going to be baptized. I'm Jewish, my child is Jewish. I said, I'm so impressed. You're so Jewish. You're so Jewish that even though you converted, you're still Jewish. You belong to a church, you're still Jewish. You married a non-Jew, you're still Jewish. You're so Jewish. Let him sprinkle the water. You'll still be Jewish. No child of mine is going to be baptized. Now tell me, is this not amazing? Are Jews not something else? Something sparked the Jewish soul in this guy, and wild horses can't shake him. So I thought about it a lot, and I realized, here's what this guy is thinking. He converted, probably to marry the girl, but he thought to himself, religion is religion, God is God, a Bible, this Bible, that Bible, it's the same thing. What's the big deal? I belong to a church, a synagogue. It's a place you go, you pray. What's the difference? Married a non-Jewish woman. A woman is a woman. She's a good woman. Many Jewish women are not as good as her. A woman is a woman. What's the big deal? But then somebody said, baptize your child. I said, baptize? Oh, that's not Jewish. There's no equivalence. Like, what's the Jewish version of baptizing? There is none. That's not Jewish. And if it's not Jewish, there's no way. Isn't that amazing? When we realize that something is really not for a Jew, we cannot do it. Even though we're not trained, we're not taught, we're not raised with it. But, hey, I'm a Jew. I don't do that. The reason we do other things is because we don't realize that that's antithetical to being Jewish. But as soon as something doesn't fit with being a Jew, no way. Isn't that amazing? This is what the Baal Shem Tov told us. A Jew is not a belief. A Jew is not a practice. A Jew is a little piece of God. And there's no way you can change it. Nothing will ever harm that. Nothing will ever compromise that. All you have to do is find that little key, that little button that stirs the Jew in the Jew, and there is nothing that can shake him or intimidate him or convince him. If it's not Jewish, I don't go there. Isn't that amazing? Tell you an interesting little story. There were some students at the university who would come to the Chabad house to study, and they had a professor of Jewish studies that they admired, they liked him a lot, and he was giving the lecture of the year. And they asked me to come to listen to his lecture at the university. I went. This man was studying ancient languages and ancient cultures. And in his lecture, he said, I discovered that long before there was a Jewish people, there was a pagan nation in the Middle East, and they believed that eating pork is wrong, it's forbidden, and they rejected pig. So obviously, Judaism adopted it from this pagan culture. So one of the students, who I knew, very sincerely raises his hand, and he says, "Professor, now that we know this, why are we still keeping kosher?" And the professor said, "Well, we shouldn't." So being the only guy in the room with a beard, I felt like I had to say something. So I said, "You know, the laws of kosher, not eating pork, is in the 3rd book of the Torah. You don't have to read that far to know that the Torah is not original. I knew that right from the 1st chapter. In the 1st chapter it says, 'Be fruitful and multiply.' I know for a fact pagans used to do that. And now that we know, we shouldn't do it anymore." Is the Torah original? Does the Torah tell us to do things that nobody ever thought of? Well, a few things. But the Rambam says, all the behavior in Torah is human behavior with a godly intention. Sacrifices was an old story. Noach brought sacrifices. Adam brought sacrifices. Cain and Hevel brought sacrifices. It was a human activity. Torah tells us how God prefers you do this human activity. People were fruitful and they multiplied before there was a mitzvah to do it. God came and said, here's how you can be fruitful and multiply in a godly way. So it's not surprising that you'll find in other cultures similar behavior. The question is only, what's God's way? Eating in general, not a Jewish activity. We didn't invent it. Eating like a Jew, that's a different story. Marriage is not a Jewish invention. Marrying Jewishly, that's a different story. So that's what the Torah is all about. Now I got to tell you a little more serious story. I get a phone call, and if you listen to the YouTube lectures, you probably heard this. I get a phone call from a guy, and he says on the phone, "I don't want to give you my name." It's already interesting, huh? I live in a small town in Oregon. There are no Jews. I was born Jewish, but in the last 36 years, I've been practicing Christianity. I'm a retired psychiatrist, and as I'm getting older, I feel a need to connect to my people. But there are no Jews here. What can I do to feel connected to my people? So, of course, I said, get a pair of tefillin. You'll put them on every day. You'll feel connected. He says, "Oh, I can't do that. Every time I try to do something Jewish, I've had a bad experience." So this is becoming a little strange, this conversation. So I'm getting a little impatient, and I said, "Look, if you do what God needs from Jews, you feel like a Jew. If you do what God needs from a non-Jew, you feel like a non-Jew. It has nothing to do with being a good experience." He says, "God needs?" I never heard that. Okay, so now we're getting into a theological conversation. So again, I said, look, God is infinite in all ways. Yeah. So he's infinitely smart, infinitely strong. So he must also be infinitely vulnerable. He starts laughing. He says, God is vulnerable? God is almighty. So he's a retired psychiatrist. So I said, Doctor, you're not suggesting that vulnerability is a weakness, are you? Because the big chiddush in psychiatry is that vulnerability is a strength, not a weakness. So if it's a strength, then God must be infinitely vulnerable. He got flustered, and he hangs up the phone. A couple of days later, I get a phone call. Hi, I don't want to give you my name. I'm the guy in Oregon. Where do I get tefillin? I said, why all of a sudden? He says, because the message of Christianity doesn't work for me. I said, after 36 years? He says, my profession doesn't allow it. I said, after 36 years? He says, let me explain. In our profession, we know that if a man, for example, were to say to a woman, I love you very much, more than anything in the world. I love you more than anything in the world. Oh, you're not interested? Your loss. Doesn't cost me anything. In other words, no vulnerability. We know in our profession that he never loved her, and when he says he loves her, it's manipulation. Because there's no love without vulnerability. What an amazing insight. He says, I can't buy Christianity anymore because Christianity says God loves you very, very, very much, but if you're not interested, you're gone, you're lost. You go to hell forever. That's not love. So I learned something really significant. How many times in the Torah does God say, I love you, to the Jewish people? In the whole 5 books of Moshe. Twice? Mm-hmm. Most of the time he's saying, you're impossible, I can't stand you, I can't put up with you anymore, you're driving me crazy. Stiff-necked people. What the Torah is telling us so clearly, God is saying, you're my people. You're my people. You're my children. What am I going to do? I'm your father. So I can get angry at you, I can curse you, I can scream at you, but you're necessary. Sometimes I don't even like you. But that's not going to change anything because I'm your God and you're my people, and that's how it's going to be forever. There's a vulnerability there, a strength of vulnerability. It's not cheap, shallow love. In practical terms, when you're raising your children, we have a very nice habit of telling our children how much we love them over and over, daily, 5 times a day, 10 times a day, especially when you hate them. No, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. You know, do you notice it's not working? It's not making them happy, it's not making them better, it doesn't make the relationship better. So you go for therapy and you're told, no, you don't love them enough. I love them with all my heart. Nah, not enough. Something's funny. Love can't be unconditional. Then it's not love. Then it's manipulation. Love can't be unconditional. A child misbehaves, he expects a strict reaction. Did you not notice what I just did? I beat up my sister. Children want to be noticed and expect a reaction. When they're nice, they expect a compliment. When they're not nice, they expect reprimand. If all you ever do is love them, they feel like you really don't care about them. So love should not be unconditional. What should be unconditional? You're mine. I'm your mother. Unconditional. Nothing will ever change that. I will always be your mother. Love you? When you're lovable, I love you. Much healthier. And that's what the Torah is telling us. You read through the Teichacha, page after page of suffering. I will make you suffer. I will make you... And you say, whoa, this is not a healthy relationship. And then you come to the end. And God says, but then, at the end of all of this, you will come back, and I will bring you home, and we will rebuild the city, and you will live forever in peace. In other words, there will be times I won't like you. But I can't abandon you. You're mine. I'm yours. Doesn't that make sense? One final story, and then let's talk. When I came to Minnesota, there was one little Orthodox shul that barely had a minyan. I think that was typical. Out of town, outside of New York, Brooklyn, very few synagogues were thriving. Barely had a minyan. And the people who attended, who made up the minyan, were all over 70. Some of them, amazingly, were American-born farmers. Salt of the earth. They didn't know much. They never went to cheder. There was no cheder. But they were Jewish. One farmer would come on Yom Kippur from the hinterland. He did not sit down the entire Yom Kippur. They say this about great people back in the old country. But this guy never learned anything. This guy never went to yeshiva. Yom Kippur, he was fasting, but would not sit down. Got to be strong for that. But there was one particular Jew that went so impressive. Here's what happened. There's a beautiful custom in Chabad, and it should be for everybody, that on the Shabbos, before the new month, we read the entire Tehillim. In preparation for a new month, you get up a little earlier on Shabbos morning, and you get together, and you read the entire Tehillim from cover to cover. And it's best to do it with a minyan. So when I arrived in Minnesota, there were 2 Lubavitchers. And we were thinking, who can we ask from these elderly Jews? Who would come and say the whole Tehillim? And we checked through the whole list, and the most likely candidate was this Jew named Yidel and his brother Chaim. They were the most sociable, the most energetic. We figured maybe they would. So I go over to Yidel, and in Yiddish, they all spoke Yiddish, I said, Yidl, would you come once a month, one Shabbos out of 4, to say the whole Tehillim? He says, only one Shabbos out of 4? I said, yeah, just one Shabbos. He says, why only one? I said, I'm not looking to start new customs. This is our custom. Would you like to come? He says, you don't understand. Chaim and I, we say the whole Tehillim every Shabbos morning. I must have looked really surprised. He says, no, I'll tell you the story. We were in a concentration camp. The 3rd concentration camp that they sent us to. And the Allies came in, I think it was the Russians, and they opened the doors and they said, you're free. Go home. We were standing by the gate of the concentration camp and we didn't know what to do. Go home? There's no home. There's nobody left. There's no place to go. We were afraid to leave the concentration camp because at least there we knew where we slept. So we felt so lost and so frightened by this new freedom. And as we're standing there, a Polish woman comes towards us with a big basket, fresh baked bread, and she's giving out loaves of bread. And she gave us a loaf of bread. And we looked at each other and we said, let's make a vow that for this kindness that God just showed us, let's say the whole Tehillim every Shabbos. And since then, that's what we do every Shabbos. You can talk about Avraham Avinu, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Yosef, Moshe Rabbeinu, Rabbi Akiva, Hillel, the Baal Shem Tov. These are huge people. These are superhuman people. And then you can talk about a simple guy who was in a concentration camp for 3 years, 30, and look at the response. They're standing at the gates of hell, and they can't get over God's kindness. Can you explain this? Are these human beings? Is that any less impressive than Avraham Avinu with his Akedah? It's more impressive. God spoke to Avraham. And here's a Jew who probably didn't get to go to yeshiva for very long. He had to work to support his family. And then they take his family away, and they send him off to a concentration camp. And he goes through the worst kind of hell possible. And he can't get over God's kindness. This is superhuman. This makes no sense whatsoever. Could you believe that there are some people who said you're not allowed to count them for a minyan? Can you believe this? Are you ashamed to be part of a minyan with these people? Well, then you should be, because you don't deserve to daven with them. There was a famous Rebbe. Somebody came to him and said, Rebbe, I need a bracha. And the Rebbe said, I'm in a hurry. He said, so what should I do? The Rebbe said, find somebody with a number on their arm and ask them for a bracha. Their brachas are even better. Do they keep Shabbos? No. Do they keep all the mitzvahs? No. They can give brachas. Because no matter what else this guy does, this is Yidel, who's passed away since, no matter what else he does or doesn't do, noticing God's kindness at the gates of hell. You're bigger than life. Your relationship with God is unbelievable, indescribable, indestructible, and yes, you can give brachas. And I think that's the bottom line. When the Rebbe said, go out and teach Jews, devote yourself to the community, don't come back, buy a one-way ticket. And we thought, wow, isn't that nice? We're going to devote ourselves to inspire others. And you know what happened? They inspired us. We thought that, in Brooklyn, there are some good Jews. And that's it. Boy, did we learn differently. We thought we knew what it meant to be a good Jew. Boy, did we get an education. Jews are incredible people. And today's Jews are more incredible than ever. In the olden days, if something was going wrong, if you were having troubles, if there was anti-Semitism breathing down your back and you had to live in a ghetto and you didn't really have what to eat and you were afraid to go out into the world, you know what people said? This is because of our sins. You're having troubles, you're suffering, you have pain. It's because of your sins. Everybody said that. It was like a Jewish way of thinking. Now, looking back at it, it's so brilliant. It's so brilliant. When there's nothing but pain, there's nothing but suffering, how do you not become a victim? How do you not feel helpless, hopeless, and give up? You know how? Blame yourself. It empowers you. It means you're in control. This is happening because you sin. Stop sinning, it will stop happening. It is so brilliant. This is how we survive those horrors, by taking the blame. That makes sense? It's fantastic. Those who didn't take the blame didn't survive. They couldn't. Now that that suffering is gone, now that the world is so much more comfortable and safe, to say if your suffering is because of your sin, completely inappropriate. Cannot possibly be true. It doesn't help, it's not useful, it's not brilliant, it's a hangover from a time when it was brilliant, but now, wrong. Wrong. Even on Yom Kippur, when you're fasting, asking for forgiveness, pounding your chest, sin after sin after sin, I did this, I did that, Are you worried that God is angry at you? Do you think that the pain and the suffering that you experience is coming from your sins because God is angry at you and He's punishing you? Then you are not thinking like a Jew. That is not Jewish thinking. Jewish thinking is, when it's useful to take the blame, then you take the blame. When it's not useful, then it's distorting everything. Would you say to your non-Jewish neighbor, I'm going to fast and I'm going to be in the synagogue all day tomorrow because, it's Yom Kippur, and if I don't get my act together and do tshuva and get forgiveness, God is going to kill me. So I have to go to the synagogue and pray all day long, Zochreinu l'chaim, Kosveinu l'chaim, please let me live. You say that to a non-Jewish neighbor, you know what he's going to think? You know what kind of Chilul Hashem that is? Because the non-Jew is going to think, after what we did to you, God is angry at you? You got the wrong God. What kind of God is this? Doesn't speak to you for 3,000 years, because the first time he spoke to you was at Har Sinai, and he never spoke to you again. Puts you through 2,000 years of absolute, indescribable misery, and if you now are not as observant as your great-great-grandfather, he's angry at you, angry enough to punish you. Does this sound like Avinu Shebashamayim? It's not true. It's not even kosher to say that. When we go to the shul on Yom Kippur, we're not expecting to be punished because we don't deserve to be punished. Isn't God just? There is punishment if you deserve. We today deserve punishment? For what? For surviving? For still being Jewish? For still wanting to be a good Jew? After all of that? How is that even possible? Finally, the Rebbe said, we want Mashiach now. And religious Jews all over the world said, well, soon. Not now. Because, you could be caught by Mashiach in a very compromised, give me 2-week notice. Give me 2 weeks. I'll get my act together. I'll get up, I'll do everything. Then, but now? Whoa, that's going to be embarrassing. If Mashiach comes now, you're going to be embarrassed? Is he going to be disappointed? Is he going to look at us and say, what's the matter with you? Don't you know there are 613 mitzvahs and you're not doing most of them? What's wrong with you? Don't you know what's written? Is he going to be critical? Is he going to find us disappointing? That's a serious question. You say you want Mashiach to come, but you don't, because it's going to be embarrassing. There's no way Mashiach is going to be disappointed. It's not possible. Because this Yidel is not an exception. In his own way, it was amazing. His reaction, his brother's reaction. But isn't that true in some other ways of every Jew today? You call yourself a Jew, you tell your children, we are Jewish. You're a hero. You're bigger than life. Why did you do that? Drop it already. Forget about it. Let it go. It's dangerous to be Jewish. Or like this guy in Oregon said, every time I do something Jewish, I have a bad experience. There's no way. Mashiach can come right now. No warning whatsoever. And he will not be disappointed. He will be humbled and awed by how Jewish we are. No question. So here's the Rebbe's way of thinking. Go on Yom Kippur to shul, fast, and ask for forgiveness. And ask to be written in the book of life. You know why? Because you're going to be written in the book of life, and for that you need some wisdom. What's scary is not the possibility of death. What's scary is God is going to give you another year of life. Are you going to treat it as poorly as you did last year? That's what's scary. Life is scary. Death is whatever. In Hasidic thinking, life is serious. Death is a joke. You need no wisdom to die. Stupid people die. But life, you need wisdom. So knowing that God is going to give us a year of life because he is not angry at us, he's angry at himself for putting us through what we've been through. So he wants to forgive us more than we need forgiveness. So he's going to give you another year with its blessings, and we are very worried. You know, a year of life is a serious responsibility. So we say, write us into the book of life. Sefer HaChaim. What is Sefer HaChaim? A Sefer means a book of wisdom. There is no Sefer HaMavis. There's no book of death. You don't need a book for that. There's no wisdom in it. Life is a book. It's a wisdom. It's a mesechta. So we ask God, I know you're going to give us a year. Give us the wisdom. We don't want to waste a precious year again like we did last year. That's what we're afraid of. Anything else would be a chilul Hashem. So let Mashiach come right now. One of the things they ask when you get to heaven, before the whole process, before the first introductory, like, where are you coming from? Where were you when you died? What were you doing when you died? Oh, it can be very embarrassing. Or it can be very nice. A chassid died in 770 on Simchas Torah during the Hakafos. An older man. And all the old guys in shul said, how did he pull that off? He's going to come to heaven and they're going to say, where are you coming from? He said, I was dancing with the Rebbe with a Sefer Torah. I said, oh, not bad. Not shabby at all. Right? So when Mashiach comes, we're going to have the same question. So what were you doing when Mashiach came? Could be a little embarrassing. That's why Mashiach should come now. So that when he asks you, where were you? You say, I was in the shul. We were talking about Judaism and... Not bad, huh? Let Mashiach come and let him be impressed. He will be impressed. Because there is nothing greater in heaven or earth than the Jew. It's true. In all humility, there is nothing greater. Thanks for listening. Any questions? Yes? No? Question? No? Yeah. Let everybody hear.